But before I turn it over to Caryn to talk about, what's really the hottest topic around these days in the Biden tax plan, I wanted to just sort of set the stage about what's happening in the art market, what's been happening in light of the pandemic. There's one of my colleagues, Jack, at the rostrum, who does a tremendous job. But to get started, I thought it'd be fun to take a poll, a Zoom poll. So the first question is, and I know we have some real industry insiders. I saw Deb on the call and Diana, so I know you guys are going to know the answer. But the first question is, what is the size, the global aggregate size of art sales, private and public? Let's see if we can let everyone kind of put their answers in for question number one. Is that working, Leah? Can you see people? And I should
have Beth go ahead and launch that poll for us.
And then the second question, which I think you answer at the same time, is what is, again, the aggregate size of online sales for art and antiquities? And I should say that the numbers relate to what was happening in 2020, which of course we know is the pandemic. And the statistics are from a report, really one of the kind of the benchmark reports that's done by Dr. Claire McAndrew. And it's put together by Art Basel and UBS this year, but it's looking back at statistics from last year. So let's see if we can get the statistics on at least what the group of on has. Oh, wow. Very impressive. So 76% people thought 50 billion is the size of the art market from 2020, and that is absolutely correct. I kind of tried to fool some people, but I guess 20 billion was too small. And what's interesting, if we're looking at the pandemic year, we were down about 22% in value from 2019. So the second question, let's look to online sales, which I'm going to talk a little bit about because that was sort of like what was really happening during COVID because we weren't allowed to be together. The answer is 12 billion. So, let me move my screen down. Let's see. Okay, so I kind of tricked more people on the second answer. So about almost 50% thought 5 billion, and then 14% thought 500 million. And what's interesting about the online sales that was happening last year in 2020 is it doubled in value from 2019. So that's clearly a trend that we saw. A lot of the auction market, although was smaller and had shrunk, was moving to online sales. And that obviously makes perfect sense considering social distancing and all of the challenges that we've been facing. So just a really quick update for those of you who are not following what's happening in the art and collectible market like we are on a daily basis. COVID, like many other industries, absolutely accelerated our digital transformation. And it's really like interesting to think a lot of the changes that have happened may not have ever happened or may have taken years and years. Bonham's online sales are 60% up in value, where the market is up as a whole about 25%. We've also seen statistics in terms of Whitney. I know Whitney, our head of marketing, is on, and the marketing department has really worked so closely with our IT department to make this happen. Our bidding is about almost 50% online now, up year on year. In the height of the pandemic, Bonham's, like all of the international auction houses, created sort of a hybrid model to deal with social distancing and quarantining. So we had an auctioneer, a live human being in an empty room that was taking bids online, on the phones. We were all like in our houses, like I was at my kitchen table, phone bidding. And it was really kind of phenomenal that it worked, and absentee bids. And we held the first one that happened in May. If you remember back in March, sort of the world stopped. And then by May, we were up and running with property selling in the UK and kind of everyone around the world. Now we're back to, thankfully, welcoming clients into our sales room, and we're allowed to have people in, but at least we have that tool in our toolkit that if, God forbid, we go back, we know how to sell in a pandemic, in a quarantine situation. And we're also holding a lot more online sales. In fact, we have a motor car online sale happening next week. And that to me is sort of a new thing. I'm thinking, okay, we're doing this. We're doing online only motor car sales. We've increased at Bonham's the number of sales. So again, we're actually growing. We're going online sales and we're going by value, which is a little bit different from the greater market. Our online sales have increased about 30%. We're also blending not just, the traditional calendar had been a really all your eggs in one basket, the fall and spring sales. And what's hard for collectors and art advisors, it's a bit of a mashup. Sales are happening kind of all around the year. I will say the sales, at least at Bonham's, are much slower because there's a lot more online activity. So it can be a little frustrating. It used to be about 60 lots an hour. I can say now 20 to 30 lots and the sales are just going on and on. But it's a good thing. It's a healthy market. We have lots of bids and lots of people that are interested in buying. We have really utilized different kinds of technology because people haven't been traveling as much. So virtual reality, lots and lots of photos, third-party condition reports, videos, especially of objects in the round, have been able to help people make decisions if they can't get eyes on property to buy things. And I think this statistic is really quite amazing. 77% of the property being sold in the pandemic has been sold sight unseen. And they're relying on the technology, but they're also relying on the credibility of the specialists and the auction houses and what we're saying about the property. We've also seen across the industry really great sell-through rates. I mean, we're about 105% on average of the low across all of our sales. And of course, our registrations are up. So that's the macro trends. I'll share some fun things that have happened just this summer. I know we're heading into kind of the really busy season. We sold this gun. This is really just one of those like crazy things. We sold the gun that killed Billy the Kid for a world record price of $6 million. And that was in a really special kind of celebration of the Wild West sale. We're not going to talk about NFTs, but we did have an NFT collaboration sale with Super Rare, which is one of the leading platforms. And I love this work of this woman in the blue dress kind of going up the escalator. That's Pauline at the mall. And that was part of we call them the OGs, which is really silly if you think about it, because the digital artists have been creating for months, not years. But we did that with Super Rare. The motor car market was more, I would say, stalled than some of our other categories during the pandemic, but it really came roaring back at Pebble Beach, which is our big summer sale in August. And we had the privilege of working with Tom Hank and selling his camper here, which sold for, I think, over $200,000. And all reports say he is as lovely in person as he acts in his movies, which is great comfort. In that sale, we also, we sold like $5 million Mercedes, really phenomenal results for motor cars. So I was happy to see the motor car category come roaring back as well. We had a great Asia week. We sold the highest Southeast Asian Buddha for about $500,000 in September. And of course, fine art. I mean, it's still kind of the season for female artists. We sold this beautiful tapestry by this amazing artist named Olga de Amarel. We sold works by Bridget Riley. And we also had, again, trends that we've been talking about, art by African-American artists. We sold an amazing collection on the West Coast, owned by a woman who was a professor at UCLA, Dr. Sarah Gray. And she was certainly ahead of her time, and she was really buying almost works exclusively by African-American artists like Jacob Lawrence and Elizabeth Catlett that did really well. And we have some great things coming up in November. We have Milton Avery. That's really a real showstopper and a gorgeous, great. So we can talk more about that. So just a quick word about our appraisal practices. We are busier than ever, as I know a lot of the lawyers are, because people are just sort of trying to think about what they should be doing. We have amazing capacity to help with multi-resident, high lot count appraisals. We focus on 3 primary values for 706s, whatever purpose you need, pretty much anything that we can do, but we do focus on estate tax, gifting, planning, and insurance. And we have capacity to do appraisals around the world. I just did an appraisal with my colleagues in Paris, No, I didn't do the walkthrough, but we have an amazing new Paris office that's really just exciting. And the best way to get started is to call us, send us photos, and we can talk about the project if it's a good fit for us or not. I'm always happy to provide, third-party independent names if that's the way you'd rather go. I was working with someone this morning, an artist estate that I didn't think would be a good fit for Bonhams, and I've made some suggestions elsewhere. So we have really the expertise almost in everything, I like to say, except for stamps. And I know a stamp guy. If you have a stamp collection in a state, we're able to do contemporary, European ceramics, silver, jewelry, you name it. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Caryn. And obviously, Caryn's an amazing estate tax lawyer with 30 years of experience. And two fun facts about her that if you don't know, she worked at the IRS. So she really knows what she's talking about when we talk about estates. And she's a very active Lindy Hopper dancer. So over to you, Caryn. Excited to hear what you have to say.
Thanks, Sherri. Okay, it's great to be here and it's great to see everybody. And yes, the appraisal market is, and we can advance, I guess, to the next slide. The appraisal market is booming because of the potential changes. And I'm going to go through the potential changes one by one with respect to what's being proposed in the Buildback Better Act. Now, of course, we only know what has been released by the House Ways and Means Committee. We don't know what the final bill will be, and we don't know what will be cut. But it does appear that the committee has taken a form book out of how to do estate planning and how to knock it out and how to knock out all the tricks that everybody's been using for the last 30 to 40 years. And so it looks like there's going to be some substantial changes in the estate planning field that are going to affect everybody, including artists and collectors. First, I'm going to talk about the capital gains rate, which is, everybody just generally thinks of it as a 20% rate, but it's not. That is not the rate that is applicable to sales of collectibles. The 20% rate is a preferential rate, and collectibles do not qualify for that preferential rate. They are, a gain on a sale of a collectible is taxed at 28%. Now, under the bill, the preferential rate is proposed to be increased to 25%, but there will be additional potential taxes added to that. There is a net investment income tax of 3.8% that could be potentially added, as well as a possible surcharge for taxpayers whose adjusted gross income exceeds $5 million. So now if we have a sale of a potentially very valuable piece of art, that surcharge is potentially going to hit that taxpayer. Now, we can go back. The interesting thing about how this bill has been written is that it is filled with different effective dates. The capital gains rate increase from 20 to 25% is currently proposed to hit on all sales that happen after September 13th, 2021. So it's anything that is being sold now, if this bill passes, is going to be subject to the new rates. So anything that was sold prior to September 13th, 2021, or that had a contract signed prior to September 13th, 2021, will still get the 20% rate, but anything thereafter will not. The biggest change, and the reason why, and we can move forward, the reason why I think Sherri is so busy with appraisals is because we have lots of high net worth clients who are trying to figure out how to use their remaining exemption before it disappears on January 1st. That is the other effective date that we're talking about. Right now, for federal transfer tax purposes, everybody has the ability to transfer $11.7 million tax-free, free of transfer tax, federal transfer taxes, or that includes estate and gift taxes. The proposal will have it decreased down to $5 million adjusted for inflation as of January 1st. Now, it's kind of a use it or lose it situation. because somebody can make a taxable gift of $11.7 million, or a couple can make a taxable gift of $23.4 million without incurring any federal estate tax and without having it burden or increase the estate tax upon their death in various formulas. But it's really just a use it or lose it kind of thing. Keep in mind that this is only the federal, and in New York we have a cliff, and I think basically anything over 6.12 million has no exemption. But the beauty of New York and the beauty of making a gift now is that if you survive 3 years after the date you make the gift, it will not be added back into your estate at all. So for a large extent, gifts made in right now, if the donor survives, are out of the New York State estate tax system forever. Moving on. The other big proposed change, and that is turning the entire estate planning world on its head, is a change in the grantor trust rules. And this change would be effective upon enactment or on the date that the president actually signs the bill. So most estate planners, myself included, and my partners and every attorney that I know that is in this field has been working around the clock to deal with this issue. It could happen anytime, probably sometime before Thanksgiving, and we have lots and lots of clients that we have to plan for and adjust their estate planning now so that they are not effective with this particular change. And I'm going to talk about it in two instances. The grantor trust rules basically provide that if you transfer property to or you create a certain kind of a trust, the transfer of the trust will be a complete gift for transfer tax purposes, but will not be a change in the taxpayer for income tax purposes. And this has been the kind of planning that we have been doing for, as I said before, decades upon decades for a lot of clients. And the problem with the way that they have drafted this proposal is that it will apply to all transfers to trusts, to grantor trusts, after the date of the enactment of the bill. And that means that we are now dealing with trusts that are in existence, that are funded in many cases, or that are expected to be funded, and all of these, any transfers that have been made prior to the effective date, the date the president signs the bill, will be grandfathered. But if we are too late in making a transfer to a trust, it's going to cause inclusion of a proportionate share of the trust assets in the grantor's estate at death. It's also going to affect it's also going to cause an immediate gift if the provisions in the trust that make it a grantor trust are removed after the effective date. Most often, we include provisions such as the power of substitution, where the grantor can substitute assets of equivalent value, and that alone will make it a grantor trust. But the biggest issue that we have the kind of grantor trust that we see most often is the irrevocable life insurance trust, which by definition is a trust that is a grantor trust. So we have a problem moving forward with respect to anybody who has an irrevocable life insurance trust. And I'll talk about why a client may be creating an irrevocable life insurance trust as we go on. But right now, I want to give you some examples. Consider how we might plan today for a collector who wants to make a very, very large gift. And that collector happens to have some pretty substantial works of art wants to continue to be able to hang that work of art on his or her wall and enjoy it, but wants to remove it from his estate and gift it to his children. So let's take Martin. He has a $10 million Rothko hanging on his wall. And he creates, in today's world, he might create a grantor trust, and he might sell the painting to the trust. You know, there would be some seed money in the trust, and there would be some exchange. Because Martin and the trust are deemed to be the same taxpayer, there's no gain or loss on the sale of the painting to the trust. Now, if Martin wants to continue using the painting and having that Rothko hang on his wall, he can now lease the painting from the trust. So he's now paying rent to the trust. And so there is not just the painting being removed from his estate, but also all of that rental income that he is now paying to have so that he can continue to enjoy that Rothko on his wall. Here's the problem. Right now, if Martin makes that gift today, he's removed the $10 million painting from his estate. He has removed the rent that he will continue to be paying for the rest of his life from his estate. But if he makes that gift after the date of the enactment of the statute, the Buildback Better Act, and he dies, and at the time of his death, the painting is worth $15 million, that painting's going to be includable in his estate at $15 million. So he has actually done nothing at all to remove this property from his estate. And in fact, his estate is not just going to include the property, it's going to include the appreciation on the work of art, as well as all the rent that's accumulated in the trust. So it has basically taken, this proposal is basically taking this entire estate planning technique for the collector off the table if it is done, if this bill is passed and an attempt is made to do this after the date of enactment. Now let's take the artist, Vivian. Vivian is a prolific artist. She makes magnificent art and she's very, very successful. The problem is that if Vivian gives her art away during her lifetime, well, it's not exactly a problem. She can give it away all she wants, and she's not really making any taxable gifts because the value of her gift is basically the value of the materials that she has put into the painting that she has painted, and it transfers over to her child or beneficiary. So the problem with that, however, is that when the beneficiary then goes to sell the painting, the beneficiary is going to have a huge capital gain because the beneficiary's basis in the painting is the cost of the materials as it was in Vivian's hand. But if Vivian holds that painting until death, the art gets a step up in basis. And if it is then sold subsequent to Vivian's death, her child or other beneficiary is not going to be paying a capital gain. However, that art is going to be includable in Vivian's estate at its fair market value. And, I have a lot of clients who are artists, and a good many of them have very little liquidity. They have a lot of artwork, and it's worth a lot on the open market and will be worth a lot at death. But they do not have the cash in their estate or the securities, the liquid property to pay the estate tax on the artwork when it's includable in their estate. So very often what we have always been doing with the planning that we've done with artists is that we counsel them to create an irrevocable life insurance trust and to have the trust buy and own life insurance on the life of the artist. And the beneficiary of that life insurance would also be the insurance trust, and it will provide for the artist's family or other non-charitable beneficiaries in most cases. And at the artist's death, there would basically be a sale between the artist's estate, which owns all this valuable art that is taxable, but there's no money to pay the estate tax, and the cash in the trust. And so the trust buys the art. The estate now has the cash to pay the taxes on the estate. And that's plain vanilla estate planning, has been for decades. As long as the insured has never owned the policy, or if the policy is transferred to a trust, and the insured gives up what's called incidence of ownership in the policy, as is the term is in the Internal Revenue Code, and the insured grantor survives 3 years, that insurance is outside of the taxable estate of the insured grantor. It's a great technique. It's easy. It's been done for years. Here's the problem. If the Buildback Better Act, as it is currently proposed, passes, that benefit is going to disappear as well. Because any contribution that is made to the insurance trust to pay premiums on the life insurance policy owned by the trust will cause a partial inclusion, proportionate inclusion of the death benefit in the insured's estate at the time of the insured's death. And so we have been very, very busy, at least in my practice, trying to figure out how in the world we can pre-fund these insurance policies, these insurance trusts, to cover insurance premiums for the life of the insured grantor and the life of the policy. It is just a nightmare going forward, especially with an artist estate, or actually anyone who has a lot of property, a lot of hard to value or illiquid property, and no liquidity to pay the tax. And when we're talking about a decrease in the exemption from 11.7 to 5 million, we're going to have a lot more taxable estates than we've had in the past. So what does Vivian do? She dies, she's got $50 million worth of art, and it's basically going to be taxed between New York and the federal government 40 to 50% if it's taxed at fair market value. Her option, she has a few options. She can give her art to charity, and we have a lot of artist clients who are charitably minded. A lot of artists form private foundations to ensure that their legacy moves on, and they give a lot of their artwork and business to charities. She can give the artwork to a spouse, but the only problem with doing that is that it's only a deferral, because anything that passes by the marital deduction, to the extent it still exists when the spouse dies, is going to be includable in the spouse's estate. She can sell the art, and that's a problem with an artist, because when you're dealing with an artist, they usually have a large inventory, and that basically means if you're going to have to pay the estate tax within 9 months of death, which is when it's due, the artist family is going to have to sell that artwork at basically a fire sale, and it will be sold for a lot less than it's actually worth. So these proposals are shocking, I think, to a lot of us in the estate planning world. And as I've said before, we're working 24/7 with our clients, not just artists and collectors, but anybody who has who's high net worth. And in New York, anybody who's high net worth, anybody who has $5 million or more of assets is high net worth because of the New York estate tax as well. So the best advice, if you have an insurance trust, I'm getting a time check. There you go. I'm just about done, Leah. If you can afford to do it, prepay the premiums on your life insurance that's owned by your life insurance trust now. And I have clients who are doing all kinds of things, including borrowing from their brokerage accounts. So, if you have assets, do it. because life insurance is, I think about over 40 years how much revenue the federal government has actually lost over life insurance proceeds because of this kind of planning. So despite the fact that the life insurance lobby is very busy down in Washington, I think this one might actually stick. And of course, seek guidance from an estate planning attorney. There are plenty of us out there, and we're all busy, but we're all on a very tight deadline because this might happen before Thanksgiving. And that means that everybody has to really get this done now. It's urgent.